People who say they're progressive, but they often have an elephant in the room in that they are progressive for every civil rights or popular mainstream issue except for Palestine, are not progressive at all. They're simply following a trend. They follow jumping on a bandwagon in order to be popular, in order to virtue signal as being, as somebody who has morality or ethics, or is a good person. But unless you are ethical, moral about the respecting the dignity and rights of Palestinians as human beings, which is the reason for why you would believe in the progressive values in the first place. Unless you believe that Palestinians have the right, then you're not really progressive. You lack that internal conviction, that internal ethics, that internal conscience, and you are simply going with the crowd, because right now the consideration of Palestinians as equal human beings deserving of justice and freedom is something that is not you can the mainstream news and politicians are not necessarily on board with that. And for that reason, people who have no understanding of morality, of why the Nazis were wrong, let's be very clear. When the Nazis were rising in power, there were many people in the UK and across Europe, of course, people who are conservatives, white Christian nationalists, people who thought that what the Germans were doing was moral and just, because they didn't understand that morality is not about what is popular. Morality isn't what is acceptable by the powerful people in your society. And yes, in today's society, what is acceptable or what is preferred by the most powerful people in society are civil rights, are LGBTQ rights, and for good reason, because they know that in order to have a functioning society, in order to have a society that is running smoothly, in order for them to maintain their power, they need to make sure that what is popular, what the consensus is, and vast majority of people who are educated do believe in the rights of LGBTQ community, do believe in the rights of people of different background, and so therefore it would make no sense for them to oppose the rights of people of LGBTQ background. However, because of the propaganda that we are seeing day in, day out, the rights of Palestinians has been obscured, has been something that is can be easily deflected from by the constant bombardment of propaganda with regards to what Hamas did on October 7th. It is something that you can somehow justify a genocide. That's what is being used. The October 7th has been used to justify genocide implicitly, because of course nobody who wants to give the impression that they are moral and just and good would never admit to committing a genocide. Of course, they believe and they act in accordance to genocide, and they even speak along genocidal act, intent. They very clearly, the intent is stated very clearly that the people are self-reporting. The army soldiers are self-reporting as to their genocidal intent. But it's something that it is a kind of a stain on your character if you were to admit that you are a genocidal person, or rather, these people know that in the liberal West, it is a frowned upon kind of admission to believe that you believe in genocidal principles. And yet they do believe in genocidal principles. They just don't want to admit to the genocidal principles. So where am I going with this? In today's society, a lot of people who call themselves liberal or progressive are progressive except for Palestine. And some of the cheerleaders of this movement are, the Jake Tappers. These are news, presenters on mainstream news channels. on Jake Tapper of CNN. You have Bill Maher, you have Sam Harris. These people are progressive, except Palestine in the most, in the most clearest sense. These people believe apparently in the rights of women, rights of LGBTQ rights. Right. However, where is this consideration for the rights of women? Where is the consideration for the rights of the LGBTQ community when bombs are being dropped on people carte blanche without a consideration for the names for the people who are at the receiving end of these bombs, which include women and people of the LGBTQ community. Now, they will turn around and say, no, the people of Gaza, Hamas, or the everyday person, do not believe in the rights of women and the LGBTQ community. But this is where the racism comes into play. You see, if you really cared about the women and the LGBTQ community, you wouldn't then therefore justify the bombing of these people. You would instead, if you cared about the freedom of these people, the dignity and the rights of these people, and you considered them as equal human beings, you would instead fight for their rights instead of bombing them out of existence. That is quite clearly, you would endorse military action that would be more specific and more targeted. And yet, quite clearly, there is a genocidal intent of bombing the entirety of the population to smithereens. We can see this on our screens. We can see this on the very landscape, the satellite imagery of the whole land being laid waste and the buildings made flattened by these carpet bombing campaigns. Now, what's happening here? These people want to present themselves as progressive because it gives them the facade of moral superiority, but they don't want to walk the walk. They only want to talk the talk because it gives them the impression that they are superior to the right wing, but they themselves are morally as as immoral as the furthest right people in throughout history. Because of course, they, whilst they would never admit they are racist, they would never admit that they're Islamophobic. They they uh, they would always they would always nest their racism or their lack of consideration for the humanity of Palestinians or lack of consideration for humanity of Muslims within the justification of Islam or terrorism being the reason for why the countries are being bombed. But when you consider that it is not the vast majority of people who are committing these crimes, and when you consider that it is because of Western foreign policy and Israeli foreign policy that has caused the increase in radicalization of these countries, then what is missing from the argument is a lack of consideration for the humanity of those people who are acting as so-called terrorists or whatever they want to call them, demons, because nothing happens without a reason. And for them, the reason why they act as terrorists, because of course, because of the religion of Islam, but they don't want to consider the rationalism that is used in the name of religion, and the reason why certain people who are not being bombed, who are not being at the receiving end of U.S. foreign policy, let's say Saudi Arabia, let's say Bahrain, these are not the ones who are acting in the way that a religious fundamentalist a militarized government is acting. And that's quite clear. If you're at the receiving end of bombardment, then you would not if you are at the receiving end, then you would obviously act accordingly. You would match the energy of the people who are bombing you. However, if you're not, then of course you wouldn't. There's no rationalism for it. So really, the worst you can say about the fundamentalist or Islamic religion is that it is, yes, it's being used, but it's being used off the back of the agreement, the injustice, the racism, the U.S. foreign policy that is used to colonize or to extract from the let's say in Iran from the coup of 1953, where the liberal democratic elected Iranian prime minister was ousted, and the U.S. The U.S. Supporting Shah was put in his place. But without understanding the justification for why these things happen, why if you torture a population, or you act not in accordance with justice, and you constantly show yourself to be the hypocrite, then quite clearly you would have an opposition to it, and it's not up to the people at the receiving end who are committing the war crimes in the first place to get on their high horse to act as if they are the political moral high ground, when they're the ones to cause the one that caused the issue in the first place. You cannot possibly have the moral high ground if you are the one who caused the radicalization in the first place. Leave it to those who are not do not have a hand in the game, who are not responsible for the mess that is being made. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe. That'd be very much appreciated. Thank you.